are talking the bizarre B-movie Chinese-speaking vampires. This one is written by Davy Williams, who also has a role in the movie as Tony, our main character, and is directed by Randy Kent. Now, this is a low-budget, schlocky B-movie horror, romance, action film. What's the story? So, it basically focuses on this actor called Tony, who is struggling in Los Angeles, and he's auditioning for a part in a Chinese movie, but the director wants him to be able to speak more fluent Chinese. So he ends up going into this kind of like this Mandarin, language school. Little does he know, the teacher is actually a Chinese vampire who has his own motivations for kind of attracting pupils, because he wants to kind of build a vampire army. The difference between the kind of the vampire in this movie and other ones is that, as he is a special kind of Chinese vampire, when he turns people, they are automatically able to speak fluent Mandarin, but then lose the ability to speak English. So what we have here is we have American characters speaking Chinese in a American movie. So what can we say that works in this movie's favour? I think that idea is quite novel, because we have seen a lot of American productions that are set in China or in Asia somewhere, and they obviously speak, in English and stuff like that to make it more palatable for, Western audiences. So it's an interesting concept to kind of do the reverse and having a, largely Chinese spoken movie, but set in America with American actors and things like that. So it's kind of a little bit of a fun twist there. But they do I think they do some interesting things with, for example, the subtitles, having them, larger and stuff to kind of enunciate certain kind of emotions and things like that. So I think it worked okay, to be fair. But if you don't like subtitles, then you ain't gonna like this movie. The movie has its finger in a lot of pies, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. There obviously is kind of some martial arts on display, and whilst it's nothing spectacular, I thought the actual fight scenes were okay for a kind of a low-budget film. I think Tony as our kind of our main character is a pretty kind of likeable guy. I'm not quite sure he's wearing eyeliner throughout the movie, but whatever. But he's a sort of a somewhat of a likeable kind of guy. Actually reminds me a little bit of Steve McQueen, I have to say, in his kind of look. I was just kind of thinking that. But and there are some kind of funny moments in the movie. The film also has some metaphors on kind of current affairs, like anti-Asian kind of like rhetoric and things like that. And we have these kind of like these vampire hunters, which are clearly meant to be a parody of kind of like far right things like this. But I don't think it's there, and it's kind of like amusing. It's a little kind of like sly kind of joke. But I think they do the right decision in never going too far with it. It's just there as a kind of a little bit of a gag, and I don't think it overshadows the movie anyway. I also think the movie is shot fairly well as well. It does seem like, despite the fact that it is a low-budget affair, it actually feels like it's produced in a proficient manner here. What doesn't work, I feel that the kind of the general tone of this movie is just spread too thin. There's just too many things, different types of genres that this movie is trying to kind of like fit in there. Obviously, as I said, we've got the kind of the martial arts stuff, but the fights are never particularly spectacular and few and far between. The vampire stuff, I don't know if the actual vampire effects are ever scary in this movie, and they just kind of seem hokey. It's characters wearing fangs that are far too big and kind of end up looking goofy, and the sort of the dusting effects when they die, kind of a very kind of cheap, early Buffy the Vampire Slayer, things like this. But the movie's bulk of the running time is actually on a romance, which I don't know if anyone watching a movie called Chinese-speaking vampires is going to be wanting to watch a romantic film. But unfortunately, that tends to be the kind of the bulk of the running time of this film. Most minutes of this film are about this kind of love story that I think is never really particularly interesting. And the character of Tony, his motivations at the beginning of the film are he wants to kind of land this particular role. and then that kind of goes out the window in favour of chasing this girl who just happens to be there. It almost looks like he instantly kind of sees this girl, and that's the kind of the story. You know, his arc is then changed, and it just seems a little bit, you know, change of direction and quite, you know, not substantial, if that makes sense. I think the character work here is quite poor. Tony, I think, is the only character that seems somewhat developed, but we have his brother, we have his friend, just caricatures to the point of they are just frankly annoying. We have these kind of like the girls that, you know, the one he's kind of he's the object of his affection and her friend and things like this, and the kind of the kung fu master Chinese teacher guy. And we have a slew of the kind of other kind of like smaller characters like the vampire hunters. We have this girl who is friends with these two other kind of women in the class that isn't a vampire, and it's just like no one gets anything to do really, unfortunately. And any screen time that they have are just like caricatures, as I say, never really kind of like feel like real people. I gotta say, I think the jokes as well. A hit and miss, but more misses than hits. It's a kind of a horror comedy action romance film, but I don't know, it never really commits to any particular kind of genre with any type of aplomb, and kind of just feels like quite bland, to be honest with you. I like the novel idea, and I think the character of Tony is quite a likeable character. You know, I say he looks like a young Steve McQueen. It would be interesting to see him do something along the lines of that. You know, the actor, but the story itself isn't particularly interesting. It all feels very light, very insubstantial, and ultimately just never particularly interesting. But it's not completely unwatchable. I do kind of like the conceit of having this Chinese spoken movie, but made by Americans for, you know, with Americans and stuff like that. I think it's a neat idea. They just should have been more done with it. It should have been a lot more of a focused film. Instead, it's firing wildly in different directions, and ultimately, I think never really hit the target, and just kind of like misses every type of genre that it's trying to go. With the exception of maybe the romance one, which I think is the one that people are going to be least interested in. But I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.